Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter what time it is when you're listening. This is Matt from the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. You are about to embark into part 2 of Aviation RC Noob episode 85 with Joshua Finn, where we continue to talk about his record-breaking free flight model, largest free flight model. And so we're going to get into that in just a second. But if you have not heard part 1, we urge you, please go back to part 1 of episode 85 with Josh Finn and listen to some of the other parts of the segment and the beginning of this conversation.
You fly indoor, the holy grail is to get yourself just enough of May of 1999 to keep you to be able to make a couple of contest flights in the really competitive classes at the Nationals. May of 1999 is like the gold standard. October of 1997. Yes. March of 2002. Yeah. It's
okay.
It's that bad.
No, I mean, but that helps understand it a little bit better.
You would think he was rattling off Cabernets.
Well, he kind of is in his in your field. That's your Cabernet, right?
Indoor is insane. Just to give you an idea, this is rubber powered. We're not launching. We're not holding it up in the sky and dropping it. We're launching it from the floor, letting it climb away. It's unaided. The indoor rubber power record the world record is 1 hour and 1 second.
Jeez.
What the?
Easy, Matt. Easy, boy.
Here's you ready for another thing? They fly variable pitch propellers. So the plane climbs away. The torque gradually drops off as the rubber unwinds, and so the propeller turns slower and slower. So that airplane on that flight, it climbed away to the ceiling, and it was cruising at about 30 RPM at the ceiling. That means it takes 2 seconds for every revolution of that propeller. And that's sustaining this thing in flight. And about 30 minutes into the flight, as that rubber starts slacking off, that little spring-loaded variable pitch mechanism kicks in, and the propeller pitch slowly drops, which causes the propeller to speed up. And then the airplane climbs back up to the ceiling, goes into a second cruise, and makes its way down. It's the most bizarre thing you've ever seen.
Wow. Have you thought about just replicating it to see how, you understand maybe how it works. Like there's something about doing it yourself and going, oh, cool. Like extra cool.
2 people have broken 1 hour. 2 people. One of them has done it. One of them has done it twice. I want to be the third person to do it.
Nice. Cool.
And I'd like to be the first person to do 70 minutes. That's sidebar on that. This is life advice time. If you do not set goals for yourself from the perspective of what am I going to do next if I achieve this particular goal I'm chasing after, it can destroy you. I've seen some people who've had one goal and become focused on it, and when they break that record or achieve whatever that goal is, they've given no thought to what they're going to do next, and they can go. At the very least, it'll burn them out of the hobby, where they don't fly anymore. I've seen.
We're kind of like, oh, what? Where's my drive coming from?
Yeah. I've seen a couple of people do that, and so I took a lesson from that, and it's not hard for me because I love flying. It's what I do. So I always have something else cooking. So after I do that,
Okay.
I'm gonna go do this over here. So that's kind of what keeps me going. I did feel a little bit of it when I built a rubber powered spruce goose. 8
Now you're
propellers,
talking
all
Matt's
rubber powered.
language.
Right. Y'all seen that?
No,
That
but
airplane-
I saw
yeah,
that
you've
actually.
seen the
Yeah.
video.
Yep.
When I did that, and I took it to a national championship and won. I literally I came back from the contest all pumped, and I'm like, I'm going to build this, and I'm going to build this, and I'm going to build this, and then I sat down and I was like, dude, what are you doing? How do you can't top that? What else is there to do? And fortunately, I had a friend who'd been bugging me about getting serious about indoor, and I said, well, I can try indoor. And that was very good for me because I went from winning first place in scale contests to enjoying what it's like to be in last place every single contest.
Mm-hmm.
It was good.
A little humbling, right?
Oh yeah. I got some real humble pie.
Get some whipped cream on that.
Oh man. Another one is I've built these composite indoor gliders for a particular style of glider flying, and I took them to a nationals. It was my last thing. I can't figure out how to get these to fly because you catapult or hand launch them up to the ceiling at full speed, and they have to roll out and then go into the slow glide with no moving parts. That's incredibly hard. I tell people that the guys that came up with that idea of how to make that figured out how to do that, that they decided they needed something easier to do than figuring that out. So they went to the moon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And by the way, the guys that gave us rubber power as we know it and free flight in general, those were the guys that formed the basis of the Apollo program. And virtually every person, all of the engineers in the Apollo program were model airplane people, and mostly free flight, a few RC. But I don't know what it is about free flight that just makes people go completely bananas in engineering.
Because they're willing to take on the impossible and say, I'll figure out a way.
Yes. Yeah. That really is it. Free flight also forces you to do something that no other. I can't think of anything else that makes you do this. You have to understand stability. So you can't put a stabilizer on it. You can't intervene on this
right
thing.
Yeah, once it goes, you have to have done it right.
So you have to make it so that, let's say it gets flipped over by extreme turbulence, you have to make it so it'll recover. And so you have to have the right amount of dihedral. So if you don't have enough dihedral, the airplane will drop off to one side or the other, and it'll just go into an ever-tightening spiral straight down into the ground, ever-steepening spiral. If you have too much dihedral or not a big enough fin at the back, the airplane will go into a flat spin at the slightest disturbance, and sometimes without disturbance.
Really?
If you have the CG too far forward, you'll compensate with too much incidence in the tail, and so when you apply power, the airplane will pitch up, and in an extreme case, it'll do a figure 9, as we call it, into the ground.
I've done a couple of those in the RC world.
Exactly. If the CG is too far back and you try to take care of it with stabilizer incidents, the airplane will look like it's flying okay, but once it gets going into turbulence, it'll either just go divergent and nose straight down into the ground, or it'll start stalling worse and worse and worse, until it either splats or folds a wing. And there are all sorts of other permutations of this. Then you're flying, especially outdoors, you're flying to try to optimize this airplane to go into those rising air currents So you start, some people that are really OCD in flying, they'll try to balance their airplanes where they'll add tip weight so that the airplane is balanced at the center line. We'll go out there and we'll intentionally add weight to one wingtip and we'll measure how far we offset the CG from the center line.
Right. So you can calculate the actual moment arm of that natural rotation. So you can control the rotation
as we start experimenting with what gets us the best response. So I've got this glider that I'll launch up there, and I measure that offset, and then I tweak it based on how it flies. But I'll launch that airplane up there, and in calm air in the evening, I launch it up there, it rolls out, and it just flies steady right-hand circles. We get out there on an active day, and I launch with everybody else, and there's a thermal around or whatever. All their airplanes just go in their steady circles. And a few guys that are watching are like, Josh, why doesn't your plane turn anymore? What did you break the tail on it or something? I'm like, no, just wait. A quarter mile downwind, all of a sudden the airplane drops the right wing in and just spirals on up out of sight. And fortunately, I'm standing by with a little button to press when I'm ready for it to come back down, because our one radio control thing is a lot of us are using what's called radio dethermalizer, where we just press a transmitter on an armband, and it sends a code to the airplane, a discrete code, and that airplane, the tail pops up and plane comes down, and you go off and get it.
So it basically activates a small servo to go from 0 to whatever the max, and then that allows it to spring.
It used to be you used a fuse, English lamp wick. You would light a fuse on the airplane, and it would burn down, and it would cut through a rubber band. There were clockwork timers. There are still guys that use fuse. I still have quite a few airplanes that have fuses, but we're running into more restrictions on flying fields where it's like, you shall not put fire on your airplane.
Fair enough. I suppose. Yeah, we don't need to start a forest fire, I suppose.
Exactly. And there have been very, very few fires produced by that. Actually, the worst fires caused by model airplanes, and this is both free flight and RC soaring, are the two big offenders, is dumping carbon fiber airplanes across power lines. So you've got your
good conductor
$1,500 molded carbon fiber airplane, and it drifts into the power lines, and there is this gigantic pow. The grass catches on fire underneath, and your airplane goes from being this beautiful thing to, I'm not kidding, it turns into a giant black fur ball. It's not recognizable as ever having been an airplane. The foam catches on fire and flashes off. The epoxy flashes off and burns up. The carbon doesn't. And so you're just left with this ball of carbon filament.
That must be fun to recover.
There are some epic photos of that type of thing, but there have been some huge AMA insurance claims caused by it too.
Yeah, I bet.
Because of, it's pretty bad.
Giant
I pained over that somewhat with this project. I was like, what happens with all of this and whatnot? But if you read the UFO reports that are coming out of the military, I'm sure you've seen some of the hype about the UFO reports.
Yeah.
If you read the transcripts, most of that is lost model airplanes. Described as...
I mean, it makes sense.
They describe this small white object that resembles an airplane. Okay. People are losing foamies again.
Yeah. It happens.
that and lawn furniture. Small.
Okay, so
disc-like object with legs sticking out.
All right. Well, let's get back to the world record. I heard that when you got out to Denver, everything was good, and then you had some sort of equipment malfunction. Do Do you want to touch on that briefly?
Oh yeah. So we maidened the airplane out here, at a field near here. Everything was looking good.
We're talking about
Took it
the
out there to
giant one,
Denver.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're talking about the world
Yes.
record plane, right? You assembled it, and you just wanted to make sure that it was going to do the thing you planned on it doing.
Right. So in secrecy, we flew it. I sent screen grabs to a few friends because we took photos or took video of it flying. That's all going to come out here pretty soon.
Mhm.
And then we packed the airplane up, trailered it off to Denver. And so I think we made 3 flights the first day out there. And the first 2 flights were really pretty. The third one, I misjudged. And so the Wandering Eagle starts, climbs up, and it wasn't climbing real fast. It started drifting crosswind straight towards my streamer pole, because I've got a carbon pole with a streamer on it to tell me what the wind's doing kind of vertically 30 feet up. And so I hit the dethermalizer. I panicked. I should have just let it go. It would have been better to let it just break down my pole. But, you panic. Because I had not, if you don't plan for a particular failure mode, you will screw up. Well, that airplane, with all that torque in there, plane's loaded up pretty good. And so when I hit the dethermalizer, it pitches up and rolls vertically to the left and just comes down on the wingtip. And we had breakaway wing bolts.
Okay. You can knife edge that?
No, it doesn't. We found out that it just doesn't knife edge that well.
Fair.
So,
fair. Okay, so you had you designed breakaway wing bolts for hard landing.
Yeah, so 18-foot air. Okay, so imagine an 18-foot airplane, and the wing is held in place by, I'm not kidding, it's held on the airplane by 3 440 nylon bolts. Those are skinny little things.
Yeah.
That's not a lot.
Yeah, that's tiny.
I mean,
no.
That's like 3/32 inch diameter or something like that, maybe less.
Right. That's the thickness of the Dollar Tree foam board, right? Like,
that's half the thickness of Dollar Tree foam board. So it's really
okay. Yeah. Oh, right. It is right. 30 seconds, not 16ths. Go ahead.
That worked. All the bolts sheared, but the problem was that since it came straight on the very wingtip, it cracked the wingtip over. And so you can see me on video just looking at it in shock of, great, so what do I do now? I put in 3 flights and smashed the airplane. We've got this guy, Bernie Olson, who was out there helping us ground crew it. Bernie's, I didn't know at the time, Bernie's a retired Lockheed engineer who designed, was on design teams for some products you would recognize. And he invited us to use his shop to repair it. And so we kind of regrouped for a minute. All right, what are we going to do here? Finally kind of congealed on, let's go to Bernie's shop tonight and fix the airplane. In the meantime, we've got pretty weather. Let's fly stuff. And I'm like, look, I've got the Dawn Patrol here. I already have tested that airplane in less than perfect conditions, and it will core a thermal if you launch it near one. It's magnetically drawn to thermals for whatever reason. So I said, all right, well, we'll put 3 transmitters on it, and we go, and our recording altimeter. Well, some idiot got so concerned about having 5 times the normal payload on that airplane as usual that he didn't think to verify that all of the transmitters were transmitting.
Okay.
He's pointing to himself.
And, for all of us who are listening, he's pointing to himself. It's okay.
Then I miscommunicated with Logan Jones, who was kind of my retrieval man, co-retrieval man, whose GPS beacon I had loaded on. Excuse me. So he had let me borrow one of his GPS transmitting beacons, and so I loaded his on. He thought I had loaded mine on, so he tuned his receiver to my frequency.
Oh no.
And we found this out later when it was too late. Now I had a third beacon, and the problem with the third beacon is I don't have a directional receiver antenna, Yagi antenna for that at the moment. So
Right, so your range is limited then, right?
Well, the range isn't limited. What you can do with the range is limited as far as you can look at signal strength, and that's it.
Okay.
But you can't relate it to a direction. So I threw this thing into a giant thermal and hop on my dirt bike, hauling after it, and quickly realize, oh crap, that thing it's going and it's drifting, and it was drifting towards some civilization off to the north. So I backtracked and went out the access road, which is 4 miles of hasn't been paved since 1980, rough terrain, and got out there. Logan went straight across country because he was like, I can find a gate and get through. He's a much better biker than I am, and had a much better. He's got a KTM, very heavy duty dirt bike. So he takes off after the airplane. I lost sight of the airplane, figuring no big deal. I'll pull out my Yagi for that one transmitter when I get out there, and I'll reacquire based on where it's pointing, and I'll be able to pick out the dot up in the sky. And I got out there, pulled out my Walston antenna, fired it up, and got static. And I'm like, oh crap. My first thought was, well, I'm under transmission lines, so I'll move out away from that, and maybe I'll pick up the signal, because sometimes those interfere with your signal. Yeah, didn't help. So I had the my transceiver for the other one, the one that I didn't have a Yagi for it, and it's beeping out a nice strong signal. So I'm like, cool, airplane's in the air, it's close by, we'll go after it. So I started calling Logan up, getting to get GPS coordinates, and he's giving me these coordinates, and I'm like, that makes no sense. The airplane's behind me. It hasn't drifted. Well, 2 hours later, we're still chasing this thing around. Logan lost visual contact with the airplane. I mean, he was right under it, just shy of 50 minutes into the flight. So about halfway to nearly halfway to the record.
Yeah.
That last transceiver, I finally lost signal on it, and when you lose signal, that means the airplane has landed, because the signal drops off dramatically when the airplane lands.
Yeah,
I lost that signal around 2.5 hours after launch. So we had the record, just had to get the airplane. Well,
you just had to kind of get the proof in the pudding, right?
Yeah, well, Logan and Lee took off with transceivers and whatnot, tuned after we figured out what had happened with the GPS units, because I went out to updated coordinates and was like, there's no airplane here, and there's no way it's this close in, because I'm still not picking up a signal from my non-directional unit. So they took off, north of the field in the direction the plane had drifted, and I don't know. Lee, you'll have to tell me how many hours y'all were out there looking and just came back utterly frustrated.
Yeah, so I think we were out there for a good 2 hours. It was getting close to dark when we came back.
Oh no!
But yeah, and
that's the worst feeling, when there's a plane out there.
Right.
You should be able to find it if only you can get close enough to get there. And I'm talking, for me, it's usually my local field, out somewhere in the beans. You're like, I know that's somewhere here,
right.
but
if
I could just catch a glimpse,
beans.
right? But it's always but the sun is going down, and I've got literally 30 minutes to go before I have no hope.
Right. And
Until
I just want
tomorrow.
to also mention that when Logan didn't see it anymore, it was still climbing.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
He lost it because it kept going up. It was probably 5,000 feet up when he lost sight on it. So
Yeah,
I
I
have
think you
no
broke that
reason.
400-foot ceiling.
Yeah. I think FAA is
Well,
going to
see,
have
we
an
fly
I'm
free
just
flight.
kidding.
We're not subject to those rules.
Yeah, technically there's no motor.
regard-
There's no it's not a powered or
regard it-
controlled aircraft.
It has to be what is it? It has to be a controllable flight
Mhm.
profile. And since these are not, they're not subject to any of those regulations.
Right.
And
Interesting.
Yeah.
so that's really handy. Same regulations that concern balloons below a certain weight. So I don't remember
Mhm.
what the weight limit is, but below a certain limit, you don't even have to notify the FAA that you're launching. And to give you an idea, the guys that are doing this with balloons, they're launching up into the 50 to 60,000 foot range and higher, and it's no longer a can we get it to go a couple thousand miles, or even can we get to go from one end of the country or another. It's how many times can we get it to orbit the globe.
Yeah. Right.
It's
It's
enormous
crazy.
distances. So yeah, we're not subject to a lot of those regulations. I do worry a little bit at the pause that will be given at some point to the if we successfully go after those FAI records with an 18-foot airplane, somebody's going to say that weighs 6 pounds ready to go. We need to regulate that.
Yeah.
Jeez, I hope not. I mean,
Don't give me any ideas, Josh.
No
Yeah,
kidding. Right. There have been people that have actually been highly critical of me doing this for that specific reason. They're like, "You're going to bring down the FAA on us," and I'm like, I mean,
you're the anomaly in the sauce that is the typical ones are just not anywhere close to being an issue, right? So you have the one or two that might be an issue.
Yeah, but that's what they regulate around.
No,
You also got to keep in mind. You got to be mindful about where you're doing this too. I mean, you wouldn't obviously launch near an international busy airport, right?
Or New York City is
or
not
if you
where
know
do
the
it.
wind direction is going that way, you're not going to launch into those winds. I mean, you got to be smart about it.
Yeah, exactly.
But if the winds are going east and there's nobody for 300 miles, I mean, what's the big deal? That's how I look at it.
Right.
One of the funny things about this is if we look at it from a historical perspective, in terms of the mass of the airplane and really the wing area as well, it is not that far outside the typical gas-powered free flight model up through probably about 1950. So it was common to fly airplanes with wing areas of over 2,000 square inches and weighing upwards up to 10 pounds. And people still fly vintage designs like that. I've got a few. Most of mine are not quite that big, but still, that's and they were flying if you look at the production numbers on engines that were produced for that size of airplane back in the 30s and the 40s, we're talking several million of those engines having been manufactured. So there was a lot of flying of very large model airplanes that were not sticking around at 400 feet.
Yeah.
By
No, I appreciate that you kind of covered, how you approached it too, to make sure that I knew you weren't being reckless about it, but to talk about, hey, if you're going to attempt a project, it's kind of like when we did, we made a 300 size Wonder out of foam board. Like that's a different animal. It takes on a different set of safety concerns, right? Because now it's not just a 1 pound plane or 2 pound plane. Now it's bigger. It's more visible. It's more prone to do other things than it normally would. And you have to at least think it through, you know, plan like Lee
Yeah.
mentioned, you know, you be smart about, okay, the wind's going this way. That's the way we need, you know, you don't launch it in a direction that's going to be a problem for anybody else. You want to be safe about it. So I appreciate you kind of going
Yeah,
through
I
it real
mean,
quick.
same as the guys that fly dynamic soaring. You've heard about the guys that are doing 500 plus
Oh,
miles per hour with sailplanes.
right.
Yes,
They have
nuts.
there is an approval process of who is allowed to even go out there and spectate. And
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that
you
makes
are
sense.
you are you are very tightly vetted before you're allowed to fly out there with that group, because it's it is a very serious safety concern. And I
Hmm.
not to get morbid or anything, but there have been people killed flying model airplanes, and
Yeah.
it's more than you think. So we have a kind of a history there there are certain things that we need to pay very close attention to, and uh, they say, and I've come to disagree with this somewhat as a pilot, but there is some truth that certain federal regulations for flying are written in blood. Uh, so you
No.
pay we, we we follow sets of procedures based on okay, what can go wrong. That's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why I am pretty much committed to our future record attempts being done with smaller airplanes.
Hmm.
Not to give too much away, but one of the concerns I have had, it's a dual concern, is one, I'm 5'8", so I'm not a very big guy, and winding that much rubber, especially at 5,000 feet above sea level, is exhausting. And so the thought has been given, look, we have the title of the largest rubber-powered airplane ever to fly. We don't
Hmm.
have those FAI records because we never could get the airplane lined up with a thermal just right to get it to climb on away and do something great. We've got spectacular flight footage. I mean, that thing looks incredible in the air, but we
Yeah.
want those
I
FAI
can't wait to
records.
see it.
And so the thought is, okay, we've got an almost 4,000 square inch wing and whatnot, which is great in terms of visibility. You could you could put that thing 20,000 feet up and you could still see it from the ground. But if we sacrifice a little bit of visibility, we can gain some flyability in terms of the airplane will have a stronger climb rate. Thermals are stronger the higher you go. So if you climb up a little higher, you have a better probability of coring that thermal and climbing on away. Lee has not even thought of this. I didn't think about it until after we had gotten back. One of the issues for why we had trouble getting the airplane to climb away as well out in Colorado as we had seen the potential for here in Georgia was I realized, wait a minute, we're flying 5,000 feet above sea level. Rubber-powered airplanes, in terms of flight endurance potential, they lose about 30% of their performance potential when you go to that elevation.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the denser the
we were
air, the better
shaving,
they'll be, right?
right. So we were shaving a lot of performance off of that airplane by flying it out there. I didn't even think about that at the time.
So
Right.
Death Valley
The
next
problem-
time.
I
You get the
love
thermals
that
and the
idea.
low altitude.
Love that idea, except for national parks and Area 51.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
They,
Nice.
man, if you look at an aeronautical chart, that gets pretty ugly out there. Where I'm hoping, I can't go into any details because it's still not public knowledge, but there is another site that we are looking at, still at the same elevation, that's a little more friendly for retrieval activities. And
Okay.
so next year we're hoping to fly out there at that site. And I've been to that site. I have actually flown and lost an airplane on it. So I know that the thermals are good. And
Okay.
we've got some exciting stuff. And I've looked at the aeronautical charts. The main thing we have to do is someplace called NORAD if the wind drifts too much to the west.
Yeah, something to be at least concerned about, right? Because they will certainly come and talk to you for a while.
Yeah.
If they don't
No,
quietly abduct you.
Yeah, that facility does have a long history of model airplane flying out there, so
Okay.
it's not an issue. We've got, I think I calculated 270 degrees of continuous wind direction
Okay.
potential, where you can drift virtually unlimited distance and not have anything that you would have a restricted area where it could possibly land.
Okay.
What's the farthest
anywhere
you've had to travel to retrieve a plane?
I have not, in terms of long chases that have been successful, I don't think I've gone much past 2 miles. I've had airplanes go much further than that. I just haven't gotten them back. I know for a fact that 2 years ago, Hope had one that we were pretty sure it went at least 50 miles, based on how long it was in the air and the direction and speed of drift and so on. We're pretty sure it went about 50 miles, but we were not able to retrieve that aircraft. The record attempt flight with the Dawn Patrol, I think it probably went about 10 miles. That's my estimate. There was not much drift that day, and but again, not recovered. I know guys who have, using radio trackers, successfully retrieved airplanes out at 50 to 70 miles, day of the flight, and that's called making sure your equipment is working correctly and staying with the airplane as it goes.
Sure.
That is one very important thing in hilly terrain. You have to stay with the airplane. If you have a GPS tracking bug, it's a little less of an issue because you can get last known coordinates.
Right.
Down
you can get
to
close.
1 degree of the horizon, above the horizon, or even less. You can get those coordinates, so you can get to the same valley that it went down in. If you're just following a directional signal, you probably, if it drifts down in a valley that's more than 2 or 3 valleys beyond where you are now, you're probably not getting it back.
Okay.
So
interesting.
That's and that part of Colorado does not have flat terrain. It's pretty rough.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, I'm just thinking of, like, I have a hard time with the 40-acre field we've got. Just trying to find it over miles and miles of terrain seems like a daunting task. But look, I know we've been talking forever, and honestly, Josh, we can probably talk for another forever. But I know we do need to wrap some of this up. I'm really still flabbergasted about what you accomplished, and it seemed like almost by accident. And that you're like, you weren't really planning to do what you did at the time you did it, but you're like, oh, look, it's happening. I guess we better do this.
Yeah.
I'm a bad influence. Ask Ben Harder.
No, you're a great influence.
No
I think
kidding.
it's right. But we have a couple listener questions that I'd love to make sure we get to you. And then I've got a question about what is the best category for somebody who's starting or is interested in this field.
I wanted to make sure we would cover that, because that's important.
Yeah. I want to make sure we get to that. So let's see if we can do that real quick, and then we have a lightning round, and then we'll close it all up. Let's see. Sasha, our flyer in style, he asked if it's possible to make a foam board free flight models of that kind of, or that kind of stuff, or and also how would he get started in free flight? What would you recommend?
Okay. So in terms of foam board airplanes, yes, I've done it. You have to spend some time shaving weight and making sure that it's optimized, because foam board is not going to give you the most efficient aerodynamic shapes. But I've got a video on my YouTube of a couple of them. They fly well enough that that I nearly lost one in a thermal. So
Okay.
I'd say that's pretty good.
Okay,
how to get
I'll look
started?
I'll look at it. Go ahead.
We're gonna get to that question a little bit more in a little bit. But the first thing that I would recommend doing is my YouTube channel has lots of how-tos. Freeflight.org is the home of the National Free Flight Society. Membership is very inexpensive, and it gives you access to all kinds of documentation. Basically, the members only section at freeflight.org is a compendium of unimaginable knowledge. If you decide you want to get into indoor free flight, there's indoornewsandviews.com. If you can't remember that, it's on in the link section on my website. And that is the compendium of everything that's ever been written about indoor flying.
Wow.
So build something simple. Don't build like a Gillows plane. I hate to just rag on Gillows, but that's the worst thing you can do. Pick an endurance model. There's a website called outerzone.co.uk. Hopefully everybody's aware of its existence. If you're willing to do some serious balsa cutting, that if you've cut balsa before, the first thing you should build is a gollywalk and just put a big plastic prop on it. They fly awesome.
Okay.
If you
That's like the commercially available plastic prop kind of deal.
Yeah. You'll want like a 9-inch prop. That's for rubber power, and those fly great.
Okay.
P-30s fly great. That's a class of airplanes. We'll get into that a little more later. If you've not built balsa before, build something with a stick fuselage, and just look for the simplest stick airplane on outer zone, and follow the wood sizes. Just build it per the plans, and off you go. Now, I will say there's one other thing. Shameless plug. I sell beginner kits for model airplanes. So if you don't want to do scratch building, if you want to buy a kit, I sell kits. I'm one of several manufacturers. There's also Peck Polymers. When you can catch their stuff in stock, they have some beginner kits. Lasercutplanes.com is John McGrath out in Colorado. He makes some fantastic beginner airplanes. Let's see who else. Retro RC is very good.
And having been by your website to look at your kits, some of the kits I was looking at, the entry point price point is reasonable. I don't have some of the numbers off the top of my head. I think you had a full kit for like $28.
We've got a balsa kit called a Pinaflyer. It's $12. You'll need to ideally you get a hand crank winder to go along with it. Those are $16. And a bottle of rubber lubricant. That's one thing I didn't talk about. In addition to the fact that rubber is like wine vintages, other subject for another day, you want to lubricate the rubber with a silicon-based oil. Castor oil does work, but anything else that's labeled as oil, that means petroleum jelly, WD-40, anything like that, that's like pouring acid on the rubber. So you want something that's inert like silicon.
Silicon. Okay, and you're saying by fine wines, you're referring to that there are some years where the rubber is made well, or some times of the year, whatever it is, and there are other times where you might get a whole batch that's not so good.
If you fly indoor, the holy grail is to get yourself just enough of May of 1999 to keep you to be able to make a couple of contest flights in the really competitive classes at the nationals. May of 1999 is like the gold standard. October
pinnacle.
of 1997. Yes. March of 2002. Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's that bad.
No, I mean, but that helps understand it a little bit better.
You would think he was rattling off Cabernets.
Well, he kind of is in his in your field. That's
I
your
warned you.
Cabernet, right?
The one thing I do want to point out, please understand this. You can be competitive in competition free flight in indoor without those batches of rubber. For outdoor, it just doesn't matter. Buy the latest batch and you'll be fine.
Okay.
So that's the main thing I want people to understand. You don't have to track down the crazy stuff, especially if you're just wanting to sport fly. And by the way, all of our meets are typically competitive. That doesn't mean you have to fly competition. Just come fly with us.
Nice.
If you never enter a score in a single contest, who cares? Just come fly.
Okay.
That's right.
I see you've got a shirt on. Is that one of the best ways to figure out where to go to get started in that?
I just had a random shirt that's covered in, may or may not be covered in nitro stains from the plane behind me. This is the Flying Aces Club. They're the stick and tissue free flight guys, and especially predominantly scale. That's something fun to check out. Those guys have a lot of fun. They predominantly build scale. They do build some what are called old timer airplanes. So if you look at the old rubber power and gas power designs, they're just so elegant, swoopy curves and all that. We fly like cutoff dates of December 31st, 1942 or whatever. Anything prior to that date is eligible, that type of thing. It's called old timer contests. And so you have to pick planes from that era. And they fly, it gets very competitive. But those planes, and I offer a few kits for planes from that era. And all those other manufacturers I mentioned do as well. And they're easy to fly. They're pretty easy to build. And they just look great in the air. Number one piece of advice is remember the thing about Gillos. Also, don't go build a scale model as your first rubber model. Remember, these things have to be taught how to fly. You can build it perfectly and balance it perfectly and go out there and it won't fly, and you'll have to adjust it. And if you're trying to fly a P-51 Mustang that's trying to swap ends, you're never going to figure out what each of the trim adjustments are that need to be made to get it to fly.
Without kind of starting on a simpler model.
Whatever.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Okay. Next question, moving on along with this. Spitfire 76 was asking, are there any 3D printed free flight designs using lightweight PLA? He's our resident 3D printing fanatic.
There is a video. There's a guy that did it. I don't know if he ever released the designs. They flew great. I think if you search for 3D printed rubber power, you'll eventually come across it. It's not easy to do. You need to really print very super light. And they're a little bit on the fragile side, even as 3D printed planes go. But there's a guy that did it successfully. And he's got videos on YouTube. Like I said, I don't know if he ever released the files for him, but we've got proof that it can be done, and it can be done very well.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Well,
assuming we're taking PLA off the table in that regard, regular PLA.
I think so. I'm pretty sure it's lightweight PLA. I'm not certain. Unfortunately, that 3D printing a rubber model is actually a bucket list item for me, and so far I have not had time to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Sasha had a follow-up question that's probably a in-depth answer. So feel free to answer that with a go click on my video kind of answer. How to design good free flight models. How to
Okay.
design them.
Here is my advice in getting started with designing. Build something that's a proven design. Find the stuff that you don't like about it, change all of that, and iterate. Eventually, you end up with a new airplane. Now, I will say I do design clean sheet airplanes. I've been doing this a long time. So I know kind of a pattern that works. Like for indoor airplanes, if I'm honest, I kind of have a basic formula of an airplane that works for whatever the mission statement is, and I don't really vary from it. So like my school competition airplanes that we sell are always going to have no dihedral. They're going to have tip plates in place of that on the wings, basically big winglets. They're going to have big twin rudders and square outlines, and I just stretch it to whatever the rules are for the school competitions for the year, and I go with that. Basically, what you at the end of the day, take something that's a proven plan form that works, and then ask, what is my mission for this airplane? So what things have to change to get there? The other thing is there are some formulas that have been created over the years that kind of dictate the proper sizing of control surfaces and whatnot, and flying surfaces, not so much control surfaces, and dihedral angles and so on. And so you can run those basic numbers, and it's pretty squishy. There's a pretty broad range of what works. And then if you follow the tail volume coefficient formula for setting the center of gravity on the airplane, meaning not 25% chord or 30% chord. Sometimes we balance them on some of them. We balance them behind the wing trailing edge because long tail, you can do that. And because we're seeking that optimum CG, and if you follow that formula, it makes it a lot easier to violate some design rules. The other thing I would say is look at your structure. Concentrate strength in the middle, out at the tips. You don't need it. Look at structures that work. I hate to make this all about competition because we need to make it about fun as well. But competition airplanes demonstrate what is the optimum. And so if you look at how their structures are oriented, you can then take that and you can apply it to any other airplane and it'll work. So people think of, well, I'm going to build a scale model of a P-51 Mustang, so it's going to fly like a Mustang. No. That's not what you're doing. You're taking an endurance airplane and you are squishing its structure into the outline of a P-51 Mustang. So it looks like a P-51 Mustang. It is not a P-51 Mustang. It doesn't have the same airfoils. It doesn't have the same dihedral angle, and the structural everything is completely different. So it just looks like that representation. The best flying rubber power P-51 Mustangs are just an endurance model that's been squished into the outlines to make it look like, that particular airplane.
Okay. We had two other questions. Tony had a question. Tony, do you want to ask that one if you're still with us?
Yeah, I can. Kind of looking over your website, I saw that you are very involved with gliders and discus launch. And I'm curious if there is a reason why almost every DLG glider is a pod and boom fuselage. I'm curious if there's a reason other than weight.
Okay. So it's not actually, it's sort of about weight. The latest generation of discus launch gliders in radio control world, and this is also true of the broader RC sailplane formula, they have all parted from the pod and boom style. It's now a monolithic fuselage. On the free flight airplanes, because molding a fuselage is pretty expensive, we haven't gone that route. And it's easy to build a wooden pod to have all your mechanical stuff, have a tapered carbon tail boom that's an off-the-shelf component, and that gets you close enough on the structure there. On the radio-controlled discus launch models, I reckon you're looking at the Evo Fire and the Spinster in particular. Those are designed to be, the Spinster is designed to be low cost. So it's easy to say, okay, I can take just a carbon arrow shaft. I can have a pod that basically its job is to fare in my electronics. That's the reason we have the pod separately, is just to have an open space for the electronics that's still shielded from the air, so it minimizes drag. And so that's why we do that on the Spinster. On the Evo Fire, we're still trying to use an off-the-shelf tail boom that is a build-it-yourself discus launch glider, as opposed to the mold stuff nowadays. And up until, I guess, about 5 years ago, the Evo was still actually pretty competitive against molded airplanes. Now it's gone completely ridiculous. It is still a fun airplane to fly. I love flying it. But if you're trying to fly competitively, the monolithic fuselages and the molded wings have just so far outstripped everything. And they are expensive. The flip side of it is, anybody that wants to get into discus launch, what you need to do is make sure you know how to fly a basic RC airplane, and then learn how to use throttle only for climb. So take your Radian or whatever out there, throttle it up to altitude at full power, only at full power. As soon as it hits desired altitude, cut the throttle. Never cruise with throttle on. Learn how to fly that airplane around without stalling it out or anything like that. And then you're ready to fly discus launch. Go on RC groups in the classified section, find a used discus launch glider that you can afford. And if I'm honest, find a solid core wing, not a hollow molded, and you'll have to do some research on that part to understand which ones do and don't. Get one of the more expensive ones in your price range and be willing to shop for about 6 months to get the deal on the plane you really want. And you'll come away with something absolutely incredible. I picked up Concept CX-5, which is still one of the top airplanes in the world. Picked it up for I think $375, and it's currently damaged. I've got to repair it, but it's an incredible airplane. I paid $200 for a pristine Validol, which is another molded airplane. Again, monolithic fuselage, and that $200 for an airplane like that you can go to a discus launch glider competition and you can be competitive with that. In terms of sport flying, man, you're going to have a blast with a machine like that. You do need to have a radio that's programmable for flight modes. They're very flight mode sensitive, more so than other sailings. But yeah, that's way more than you asked for about discus launch. I just kind of dumped all on you. I'm sorry about that, but
that's okay.
That's my take on it.
I honestly, the purpose of my question was more aesthetics than anything. I've always been a scale modeler, and the pod and boom just doesn't excite me. But I want to try a DLG. So
Yeah.
I'm also curious, and like if you were to build a very light balsa fuselage, I'm assuming it just can't take the force of the launch.
Yes, that's correct. There was one successful all wood discus launch glider. I think it was called the Falk, Falke. It was made in small numbers, and I think they used spruce for the fuselage. And I've never been able to get my hands on one. They were made as kits, very nice kits. And my understanding was you could pretty much throw them to the limit and they would stay together. So in theory, it's possible. I guess that's not in practice. It's possible. You gotta know what, exactly what you're working with to make it work. If you're building foam board, yeah, just use a carbon arrow shaft for the fuselage. You'll save yourself a lot of grief and heartache. That's but spruce in theory will work in theory.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know
Okay.
when they're doing the foam board ones that I've seen, they kind of sandwich two halves together, and to add strength to the wing, if they're not adding carbon fiber strips, they will put a plastic, like literally a piece of plastic strip out to the hook, so that kind of lends the strength all the way back to the root again. So that's kind of how they make a
Yeah.
DLG work on a lightweight, softer material.
From the foam board
what
ones I've
we've
seen on
done-
the forums and that, the
Mhm.
work it takes to get a good airfoil on those, you might as well just
Yes.
build a wood airframe.
Yeah. Look, teach their own, right? It's what materials you have on hand. If you're like me, I've got like 3 strips of balsa, so that's not going to be the easiest thing for me. I've got a million pieces of foam board, and if I've got a willingness to sand, I might be okay. But you're right. I mean, it's about the same amount of work. I agree with you.
All right.
I will say just to add, there's a guy named Flyboa on he's on forums a little bit, both RC groups and flight tests. I mean, his wings are they're pure foam, which is kind of what I did with the Spinster. And the performance he gets from those things is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Now he uses balsa for the tails. We've not found a way to make foam board work for the tails. But for the wing, you can make a foam board wing. And I mean, you're going to build more than one to get one that you like. And they do wear out over time. So longevity is an issue, especially in wet climates. He lives in the desert, so he doesn't have that problem.
Yeah. It's worth
Must be
looking
nice.
into if you're interested.
Thanks. Lee, I know Lee had a question, and then I think we're going to work on moving to start to close up. Lee, do you want to go ahead and ask yours?
Yeah. So, Josh, I got a question for you. So, are there any future plans for the Wandering Eagle? What's next?
Yeah, so we have some mechanical issues that I want to work out with the airplane. So I would like to try to push it harder and at the very least kind of get some footage of it going forward. We are having an issue that Guinness seems to have de-recognized their class for the largest rubber-powered airplane. So I'm hoping that just the release of the flight footage will prompt them to suddenly decide, maybe we should sanction that one more time. And so we'll go after it at that point. And I can make the airplane without building an entire new airplane. Any record I need to, I can as far as size, I can make the airplane do that. But we will continue to demo fly it from here and so on. I do want to try making a radio controlled set of tail surfaces for it so we can fly it radio control at meets where we don't have, tens of thousands of acres of territory for it to wander around on. I have given some thought even to putting landing gear on it. We'll see how that all goes. But going forward, without letting too much out of the bag, there are going to be smaller airplanes built. They will still be very large. Don't get me wrong, but there are going to be smaller airplanes built that are a little more structurally optimized. So not quite as rugged, but designed to go after higher performance. Because I now have a pretty good feel for where that's all going to go. I would also like to use the findings of our research to hopefully release some hot wire cut Mulvihill class airplanes, and those would be as production kits. Excuse me, allergies are still getting to me. Those would be designed to provide a more entry level type of aircraft for that class. So I think that's the main things we've really identified going forward. The FAI record attempts, we're going to proceed. I mean, I'm going to keep going until we get those records. I will not give up.
Well, I think I might know a guy that does hot wire foam cutting.
Yeah, I've heard there is some dude. He may even be in this podcast.
He even says, I've got tighter tolerances than anybody ever gets. And
I've never said that.
Well,
but I do.
Okay, then most people
I do have pretty good tolerances, but I've never said it's tighter than anybody else.
Most people. How about most people? Is that better?
No,
Sorry.
I do try my best to cut as close as I can, is to be as accurate as possible. And just for the record, Josh, I am interested to continue working on collaborating with you on various projects. So definitely looking forward to working with you in the future, man. I just want to say thank you for letting me be part of this project too, because I learned a great deal. I mean, I honestly didn't know much about free flight when I, talked to Josh and said, "Hey, I got this silly idea," and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And when I went out to Denver, that was such an education. And I loved every minute of it. It was great. So thank you, Josh, for letting me be part of this too.
Thank you.
Well, there's a number of. I'm sorry, I think I overwrote you there. Go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to tell the thank you. You made possible the fulfillment of a long-term dream of mine. So it's been a fantastic experience. I look forward to what's next. I really do.
Awesome. We will have to check back in sometime, Matthew.
Yep.
With you, Josh, to see how that goes, because there's a couple things that we didn't get a chance to get around to. I know Matt loves STEM stuff, and he wanted to talk about that a little bit, and what you can speak to it, and how do you fit in, and all that, and then maybe the opportunity to dive into differences between or even within the FAI on F1D, F1J, F3J, everything going on there. When I was watching the video where you were in flight test, or you were in the flight test, came out and sat down with you, I saw the ornithopter, which was crazy. I'd love to know a little bit about the engineering behind that. And I mean, there's just still so much more that can be unpacked around this whole thing, because there's a whole side of the hobby that Matthew and I really haven't touched, and I definitely haven't. So thank you for your time and being able to come out and spend this much time with us. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Awesome.
that.
So, as we always do, we need to, before we go, give you the lightning round, which is 10 quick this or that kind of questions. You just answer fast as you can. Don't think about it too much, and don't worry, we'll send all of the complaints to you.
Okay, perfect.
And then we'll officially close it out, and then we'll have to invite you back for sure. All right, Joe. Usually roll through the details on the front of this really well.
Actually, you did it pretty well.
Okay.
So let's get on into it. Question 1, sit or stand?
Fit.
RC or free flight?
Yes.
Indoor or outdoor?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Hey,
I have to say right now I have to say outdoor. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
fair. Local, state, or national?
If you haven't been to a national championship, you can't understand how incredible it is.
Right.
I bet there's tons of people out there.
Yeah, that must be
yes.
utter mayhem. Oh, good. Okay, clipped in or no safety clip? Referring mostly to the lanyard, but
Oh, I do not fly with a safety harness. I assume we're talking transmitters. I do not use one.
Yeah, you're a brave man. Futaba, Spectrum, open source / T16, nothing.
I am an utter barbarian. Free Sky, typically on either a Free Sky radio or a Radio Master.
Hey, I started out with a Turnigy, so I can't say anything. Pinch or thumb?
Thumbs, because I taught myself and I screwed myself up.
I did the same thing.
Under 400 feet or spacebound?
What the FAA doesn't know won't hurt them.
Foam or balsa and carbon fiber?
I have to say balsa. I really do. Can do so
Okay.
much with it. It's what I started with.
I guess as an add-on to this, plastic or tissue? Maybe film or
Believe it or
tissue, I
not.
should say.
Believe it or not, I
Okay.
used to be a tissue guy. I am now a plastic guy. If you can't tell that,
No.
designed in 1955, it's all stock except it's covered in plastic.
Very good. And probably the last and most important question that we have to ask you, creamy or chunky? Creamy or chunky? You can ask the follow-up,
Say
Joe.
what?
Creamy or chunky?
Creamy.
And does
Definitely
it change
creamy.
if you add marshmallow fluff?
He's got the right response, I
I
think.
don't know that I've tried the marshmallow fluff, but I think chunky would probably be better in that case.
See?
Very good.
I knew I liked Josh.
So what I was going to say there, and I didn't cut in on Matt quite fast enough to stop him.
Oh.
No, I was trying to cut in on you. I was going to say something more along the lines of something cultural. We've had once or twice where we asked that question of somebody and they're not like peanut butter just isn't really a thing in their culture, and they're just like, what are you talking about?
Like, why would you ever? And I'm like, how about this? Maybe Nutella? And they're like, oh, Nutella. Yeah, well then, yeah. They're like, Nutella or peanut butter. And they're like, oh, geez, that's a totally different question. It's funny. It's always interesting.
I was raised in the South. Fun tidbit: until I was in my late 20s, I had lived my entire life in South Carolina. So peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are
Hey.
life.
Yeah.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah. So Joe's out of South Carolina. I'm out of North Carolina. Right outside of Fort Bragg. So yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, guys, I think we're coming up on the end of this. It has been a long conversation, but extremely enjoyable. I'm going to work on closing us out if you're okay with that, Josh.
That's fine with me. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been an honor, and Best thing I can say is check out Free Flight, give it a try. You might like it.
Right. Definitely. And you can get all sorts of supplies and kits and information on your jhaerospace.com. That's your website, right, for your company. And
Yes.
you also have a YouTube channel, Josh Finn. Is it Joshua Finn, I think?
It's Joshua W. Finn is the channel name. It's just carryover from my email address. I never changed it. I just pick something and stick with it.
Excellent.
Nothing wrong with that.
We've added a number of links to, we're going to add a bunch of links to Josh's videos, some of the ones he talked about while we were talking to him, as well as the we'll call it the videos he had to rival, which are the ones from Walmsley and Think Flight. And there's a couple other fun things in there, and then a couple links to the Flying Aces Club. And they have, why I suggested that is because they have a map on other places you can do free flight kind of competitions and meets and things like that. And they have a whole calendar that tells you where in the US and other places you can go to do this. You have rocket gliders, all sorts of good stuff. So yeah, go check that stuff out. Even if you don't sound like you're that interested, take a look. You might be surprised. Plus it's a great source if you're going to do free flight to grab some of the rubber. Hopefully it's all vintage that Josh sells. So.
That's right. That fine Cabernet. I think that's a wine term.
Anything else you'd like to add, Josh?
I think the last thing I would like to add, I'm going to put in a plug stem. Roughly, at current numbers, roughly 20,000 students every year fly rubber-powered airplanes in indoor competition in the United States. They are the largest single segment of the hobby. 90% of them never get exposure to people flying model airplanes recreationally to the point that they get the opportunity to pursue it. So if you have an opportunity to check out Science Olympiad or Technology Student Association and get involved in that, those students' lives will be changed by your involvement. I personally have had many who have become aeronautical engineers, pursuing successful careers out of that. And honestly, whatever you do, go out there, enjoy flying. We live in the best place in the world to go flying. Just enjoy the opportunities. There's so much you can do.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for that.
It's a good note to close on.
Well, before we ultimately close it out, Tony, you got anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
Lee?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, guys. And for your carbon fiber needs, go to windcatcherrc.com.
Great commercial. Well done, sir.
All right, Matt, if you don't have anything else.
No, I am excited to bring this to a close, and because that means that we can plan the next time that we get together and talk to Josh about some of the other exciting things, like a Facet Mobile or anything else like that.
We'll hold that excitement in for about 90 seconds as I say,
okay.
Well, guys, as always, we thank you for tuning in and listening. We hope you've enjoyed listening to this conversation as much as we've enjoyed having it. Feel free to reach out to us. You can email us, Matthew at aviationrcnoob.com. You can reach me, Joe at aviationrcnoob.com, or you can reach us both, aviationrcnoob at gmail.com. Feel free to swing by the website once it's back up and running, aviationrcnoob.com. You can swing by our Facebook group. It is a group, not a page anymore. And check down in the doobly-doo, along with all the other links for the Discord server invite. Come join us, hang out, come to a build party. Somebody asked me earlier about it, and Matt, we need to do another sim party sometime.
Yep. I'm going to let you lead that charge, and I will make sure to support it in every way I can.
Yeah, I don't know when that's going to be, but there was a conversation about what's that Sim chat about? And I said, oh, right, we have a channel for that. Oh, man. All right, I think that's most of my outro roll. Do you have one more thing?
Yeah, one last thing. Go ahead and send us complaints. We'll forward them along to Josh. Easy peasy. That's all.
All right, guys. If you haven't watched it, go check out part 3 of Josh's flight video. I'm looking forward to seeing it because it hasn't come out yet, but it should be out by the time this episode goes live. And fly safe. We'll catch you guys next time.
See you then. Bye, guys. Tony, what about you? You able to talk to us? I'll make sure you're coming through.
Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent. I appreciate you being on, Tony. You did not sound enthused, and I hope we change that.
Well, I was talking to myself for a minute, and then I realized I had myself muted.
Okay, so that's a disappointment.
I may or may not have castor oil and nitro stains on my shirt right now.
Well, that's a proper RC shirt then.
Oh, yeah.
Nice coffee mug you got there, Matt.
Yeah, there is a wonderful agency called Windcatcher RC. And he gives you attitude too, free of charge.
I seem to remember some manufacturer that buys a lot of carbon fiber from him.
Without him, most of the RC people who in the business of balsa kit building would be out of business because they'd have to find their carbon fiber from their source, scraping it off of trees. That's where it comes from, right?
Oh, man.
Hi-oh. No. Oh, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, carbon fiber is scarce unless you want to go way back to the source and try to walk up the hills of China, or at least the large buildings in one of the major cities, right? Shenzhen. Because otherwise, I don't know too many sources of carbon fiber outside of them.
Right? There are other sources. They are vastly more expensive.
Yeah, they're aimed at different markets, I think.
Yeah, there's
different.
Here in the U.S. for the hobby side of things. I think one of the first suppliers was Composite Structures Technologies.
Oh yeah, right.
Founded by Matt Gawain, who was a free flight guy like myself, and he sold it. I don't know, about 15, 20 years ago. And they import from the carbon fiber manufacturers in Germany, and it's an extremely highly precise product. But the prices compared to what Lee is offering, it's about 600 to 700% higher for any given thing.
Yeah, best prices in the business.
Yes, by an enormous margin.
This the best price this side of California. I don't know anything outside of that. Anything west of that, I'm out. I couldn't tell you anything. Okay. I'm going to have you introduce the episode, Joe, and you're going to hand it off. I'm going to stumble my way through the worst intro you'll ever get, Josh. I'm going to do my best for that.
Are you
I will also introduce.
That, or do you want me to roll for it?
Ultimately, I don't really. I want to make sure that, Josh, you understand that I always fumble this. That's part of our charm, I like to think.
I kind of like that. That's fun.
Okay.
Don't do too formal.
Well, I mean, we'll do it the way we do it, and it'll, like I said, it'll probably be fun.
Okay.
It may not be as polished as I like to think it would be.
So do you want it or?
We're good.
Okay. Well, I did
He
bullet.
wants it as it is.
I did you bullet points down here.
What? Now what am I going to do?
Not read a script.
What? I think people love that. I'm just kidding. No, we're good. That's better.
No, that's your history segments.
Okay. Joe, I'm going to screw up your recording here. I got something going on with my microphone.
That's fine. Take your time.
Yeah.
This can be
We'll
cut
edit
out.
this in, with a bunch of intermission music.
This can be cut out in both video and audio form.
Yeah, all of a sudden I can hear myself.
Oh, that's always disconcerting.
There we go. Yeah, I don't really like listening to myself.
Did you somehow go into your mic settings and turn on listen?
Yep. When I was testing the mic and then I forgot to turn it off.
Yep, that'll do it.
All right.
All right, so we're good now.
Great.